Just they're told.
Hey Colt, what's going on, bud? So did your dad kind of explain everything to you?
Said something about
shooting up a school.
Did you say something about school shooting?
Never. I just told him, I don't know what. Maybe they misheard somebody else. I don't never say I was threatening them to shoot school.
You never ever said.
No, I swear.
Do you use Discord?
Discord?
Yes, sir.
I used to. I don't have it anymore.
When's the last time you used it?
Like a few months ago.
Really? I gotta take it at your word, and I hope you're being honest with me. I'm not saying you're lying, but it's
a serious thing. Really.
It's not unusual for people to lie to police.
He's familiar with that too.
Whenever you're listening to this, there's probably one today. How sad. How sad. My name is Ashanti, and welcome to the Taking Off the Mask podcast. This season, we're talking to teachers. But today, I'm going to do solo. I'm going to talk to you. I'm going to talk to you about guns in schools. Now, this is not going to be a political talk about guns in schools because there's plenty of people out there doing that. I'm going to talk about teachers and students. I think that we are underestimating the impact that these things are having on students' lives. And not only just students who are experiencing them in their schools, but the students who are reading about them, the students whose parents are telling them about the stories, the students who are seeing videos on social media, all the other ways that students are getting information. We are raising a generation of youth who have a lot to worry about. I don't know what your worry level is about schools and shootings and guns, but I hope this conversation will help us to decide that we can't continue ignoring it. So I want to try and navigate our conversation around a couple of pieces of information. So I'm going to be looking at a document here. So if you see me, those who are watching, I'm looking at something, I'm reading some notes and definitely some data that I want to make sure I get right. First, I want to presence the name of the most horrific of the most recent school shooting. There's been several. There's been actually one today, actually, as I'm recording this, just happened in Omaha. And then we had Joppatown on the 6th of September. And then September the 4th, we have the one in Apalachee High School. So in Winder, Georgia, there was 4 lives claimed. I'm going to name those: Christian Angulo, Mason Schermerhorn, 14-year-old, both of those, and then 2 teachers, Richard Aspinwall and Christina Ermey. And so to all the families, we know that there's a lot of condolences being put out. There's a lot of flowers being laid out. There's a lot of vigils being put around. And I hope that what we don't do is continue to say the same rhetoric over and over again. And I think that in this conversation, what I'm going to hopefully presence is the need that we have more than ever to be asking our students how they are doing. Now, there's a lot I can say about what we know about what happened in at Apalachee High School, but I also don't want to ignore a shooting that happened here in the Bay Area in San Francisco. A young man, 17 years old, a senior in high school, shot a professional football player from the 49ers. Trying to rob him. A senior in high school on a Sunday who lives, let's say he lives an hour and a half away. Depending on how fast you drive, he lives an hour and a half away. He was downtown San Francisco on a Sunday, or maybe it was a Saturday. I don't want to get that wrong. But either way, it was a weekend, and he tried to rob a football player. Now, I don't know if he knew it was a football player. It doesn't really matter. The fact that on a Sunday, as a senior in high school, he thought the best idea for him to prepare for his senior year of school is to go and rob somebody. He was prepared. He had a gun with him. I don't know that it was like a whimsical thought, like, oh, let me just try and do something new. But more than anything, what we continue to see, now that student, 17 years old. The student in Georgia, 14 years old. I don't know the ages of the ones that happened over the other couple of days, but young people, teenagers, are harming each other and themselves. Now, we have a lot to conversate about this. We have a lot to talk about this conversation. So here's where I want to start. I want to start with a piece of data that I think you should just know in terms of what's happening in schools around the country, okay? And what has been happening for years. At Columbine in 1999, since Columbine, 417 school shootings have happened. 417 school shootings. That averages about 20 per year. Okay. Now, there were some years that we weren't weren't really in school, right? So we have some data that from the 2 years that we were pretty much out of school, but every school was different. Every school around the country was a little different. About 20 school shootings a year. More than 383,000 students have experienced gun violence at school since 1999. 383,000 students. I'm hoping that your student isn't one of them. But if your student is not one of them, if your student is not yet experienced it at his school, we hope that also their community hasn't experienced it. Because a lot of the things that are happening not only happen in our schools, it happens in our communities. But when we're at school at a place where we're there for learning and hopefully to feel safe, when we are traumatizing kids in that way, when kids are being traumatized in that way, and we don't make room for letting them talk about it or express it, and what we continue to see with the masks over and over again with the Million Mask Movement is that young people know that they're going through stuff. They've gotten really good at saying, I'm good, I'm cool, I'm fine. But what's happening behind the scenes is that they don't even know that people can handle it. People don't even understand it. Our schools are hurting. Our teachers are struggling. The phones that we are dealing with our kids, the addiction to these devices is causing so much chaos in our schools. And guess what? If we don't begin to find a way to support our young people around their well-being and their development, we are going to continue cleaning up the messes. We're going to continue having these conversations. And listen, I am, my heart is broken for what I'm seeing. Like I'm truly sad about this. We're 1 month into school. Like Labor Day just happened. Like school has just started. Some schools have been in school for about a month. Some have been in for a couple of weeks. And over again, we continue to hear the same thing. Over and over again, we continue to hear people blame one thing, ignore another thing. They say, oh, it's a mental health issue, so they don't have to focus on what's happening with the guns. Oh, it's a gun issue, so we don't have to focus on what's happening with mental health. It is a holistic issue. It is not just a one thing issue. How are we as educators, as teachers, as parents, as community people, as advocates for young people, how we're going to come together and make change? I just learned about a new fellowship at Harvard University. I didn't know about it or I would have applied. It's a redesign of education. I think it's called Redesign Education. I think it's what it's called, Redesign Ed, something like that. I don't know what it's called, but there's a new fellowship. And one of my friends, he's a friend now because he's an adult, but he was a student when I was a teacher my first year. He is in that program, and I'm so excited for him. He's the leader of the Hayward Promise neighborhood here. And it's Edgar Chavez. I was going to miss his name for a second. I am excited that he's going to be a part of helping redesign education. We need more fellowships that are about people coming together to help figure out how we're going to redesign education. And even though I'm not a part of that fellowship, I will be hopefully reaching out to them and figuring out how can I be a part of some of these conversations. It is so critical. You know, a quote that comes to mind every time I hear about this violent situation that we continue to see in school is there's an educator, maybe you've heard of him, Parker Palmer. One of his books that is one of my favorite books is The Courage to Teach. And he's had so many quotes in that book, but one of his quotes, and I don't know if it's in A Courage to Teach or another book, but it says this in one of his quotes. It says, violence is what happens when we don't know what else to do with our suffering. Violence is what happens when we don't know what else to do with our suffering. And our young people are suffering. They're suffering often. And every time we go to a school and every time we make masks with students, whether they're in middle school, whether they're in high school, whether they're in 5th grade, they understand that here's what I let people see about me. Here's what I'm letting people see on this mask. And here are the things I'm not talking about. Here's the things that I can't share with people. That student who designed the I'm fine shirt, that student understood intimately the idea that I say on the outside, I'm fine, I'm good, I'm cool, I'm chilling, I'm doing great. And oftentimes we miss the fact that they are going through stuff way deeper than we can see. And since we can't see it, we at least got to make room for them to talk about it. which is what we've been doing with the Million Mask Movement. And we're really in the next chapter of this work. And so I want to talk about a couple of things. As I keep mentioning the Million Mask Movement because what I'm trying to do this year, what we are trying to do this year is find educators around the country, around the world, but definitely right here in the U.S., where we continue to see these problems of young people exploding, young people walking around like landmines and no one even knows they stepped on it. And all of a sudden, a student comes to school and now the whole community is traumatized. I read a little article about a 17-year-old in Georgia who said, I'm 17 years old. I don't feel safe in school anymore. Imagine if you were sitting down with many students and they trusted you to answer it honestly. Many of them would say, I just don't feel safe at school anymore. And maybe if your state has never experienced it, maybe you don't have the same type of energy around it, but it doesn't mean that you're not experiencing it in your body. It doesn't mean that what has happened inside of you, maybe nothing has happened to you. Maybe it hasn't happened at your school, but it doesn't mean that because you are in this device all day long, it doesn't mean that you haven't yet adopted the feelings of what's happening as you see kids running from class to class, as you see kids jumping through windows to get out of their school, as you see kids hiding under their desks and tables, as you see text messages between parents and students like, Mom, there's somebody out in the hallway shooting. And the mom is like, just stay still, run with everybody else, like stay cool, stay calm. Like, what do you say to your kid when they send you that message? What do? The U.S. Surgeon General has just released an article, an advisory about parents, about the amount of stress that parents are going through. I think that 33% of parents have said, I feel an overwhelming sense of stress. So not only do we have to support our teachers who are navigating hundreds of students every day, we need to also support our parents. And guess what? I don't think that the job of parents is easy. I spoke about this a couple of weeks ago. I have a newfound respect for parents because of what I experienced this summer in our Social Emotional Leadership Academy. And I'm excited of what I learned this summer because it is an opportunity for us to do a deeper dive to make space for community, parents, teachers, and students. We can't just say because you're a kid, you don't feel the same stress. We can't say because you're a teacher and you get summers off, you should feel no stress. We can't say to parents, well, you get to send your kids off to school every day, so you should feel no stress. We need to have more empathy and kindness and respect for each other to recognize that we're all going through stuff. We're all carrying loads. Some of our loads were packed before we even showed up here on the planet. Some of us are carrying loads of people before us that they handed to us because they didn't want to deal with it or they didn't know how to deal with it. So they packed our bags with a bunch of their baggage. And now we're carrying around not only our own baggage, we're carrying around people before us baggage. How much baggage are you carrying? How much baggage are you carrying that you don't even want to be carrying? You don't even know how you got it in the first place. Maybe it's time for us to take some breaths. Look at all the baggage we're carrying and decide when enough is enough. Decide that today, I'm not carrying this any longer. I think we need to do some more of that. So here's what I want to do. I'm still, as we're talking about these students, talking about teachers. And we can't ignore the parents, right? Because the parents are part of the play. But I don't know if you know, if you heard that the parent of this young man is also being charged. Now, I've heard people out in the media world say, well, it's not fair to be charging the parent. I mean, if you're going to charge the kid as an adult, then why would you charge his adult around him? Well, listen, parents, you still have responsibility. Now, there's lots of thought processes about how that works. Well, if you thought your kid was an adult at 14 and you want to emancipate them, then emancipate them so they can be on their own. And then you can say, hey, he's an adult. Don't blame me for his stuff. But if you are still the person in charge, paying the bills, providing the funding for their research, providing the funding for their livelihood, then there's something to be said about the responsibility you have too. Now, This gets into a little bit of nuance. I'm trying to stay as non-political as possible, but and it's not political. This is a direct situation that we experienced with our students. But there was an interview with the father and son a year ago. Some people, I don't know if they were police or sheriffs. I think it was the sheriff's office. They went to the house. They had a tip on Discord that there was somebody in this town that was talking about shooting up their school. They were at the front door of this family. They were talking to them on the porch. And I'm going to have you go listen to it on yourself. I'm not going to play it here. I'm going to have you go listen to this conversation because, listen, as a former administrator of middle school students, and this kid was middle school then, as a former teacher, as an educator, as a person who likes people and talks to people and talks and cares about people, I'll let you read to your own conclusions about what you heard in that conversation.
Hey, Colt, what's going on, bud? So did your dad kind of explain everything to you?
He said something about school
Shooting up the school.
Did you say something about school shooting?
Never. I just told him, I don't know what. Maybe they misheard somebody else. I don't remember say I was threatening them to shoot school.
You never ever said.
No, I swear.
Do you use Discord?
Discord?
Yes, sir.
I used to. I don't have it anymore.
When's the last time you used it?
Like a few months ago.
Really? I gotta take it at your word, and I hope you're being honest with me. I'm not saying you're lying, but it's
a serious thing. Really.
It's not unusual for people to lie to police. Okay.
He's familiar with that too.
Hey, Colin, what's a good phone number for you, sir?
But the one thing I will say is that if you knew that there was a message coming from that home, I mean, it was pretty clear that they had some information about it. And then you tell the kid, well, hey, if you just look me in the eyes and tell me it's not you, then I'm going to just have to believe you. Ask any kid who's ever lied before. Can you look somebody in the eye and lie? And they will tell you, of course. That's the only way you do it. It wasn't me. And guess what we experienced with this kid who got them off their back by just telling them, I know nothing about that. I don't even use Discord anymore. I haven't used that in months. I am not blaming anybody in that case, but I am saying as a teacher, maybe we got to help people have better questioning skills. Now, would they have figured it out by asking better questions? Who knows? If there are plenty of people who can answer a question straight face and be deceiving you in the same moment. But I want you to know that when we know kids are going through something and we try and cover it up and we try and pretend that they're not, listen, we are only going to prolong the problem longer. We're going to put the problem down the line. We got middle school students who are heading off to high school, not academically ready, not socially ready. And yet we send them off to the high school and say, hey, thank goodness you got them now. I don't have to worry about them. And we pass them off to the next school. And that's what they did with this young man, right? Middle school knew that something was up. The people who came to his house knew something was up. And everybody listened to the, I'm fine, I'm good, I'm cool. I don't know anything about that. And we kept it moving. And as the story gets more developed and as we hear more about what happened, we knew that on the day of, there was people trying to call out people, like saying, hey, go check on him. Somebody go check on him. Please go check on him. And you will have to do your own research about what you are learning about what the mom said she tried to do. And there's a lot of people who are going to need to look back at their own steps that they took to make the situation better. Listen, we call schools all the time. We as an organization, we're reaching out to schools. And listen, you can call 10 schools and you're going to hear 10 different voicemail systems. You can call 10 different schools and you can find some schools will answer on the second ring and some you're going to be leaving a message for 10 days. There is a system there. But this parent talked to the school counselor the morning of and said, hey, I need somebody to go check on him. Now, listen, like I'm getting into more of a story than you may know about, so I'm not going to try and fill your head with what the story is because I'm not here to be a news reporter. I am here to say that what I continue to see over and over again is that we have young people who are asking for people to see them. Can you see that I'm hurting? Can you see that I'm struggling? Can you see that I need something else? And we as adults, we as community, we as educators, we as those who are responsible for them, we have to continue doing a better job about it. As you can see, I'm not here talking about guns or not guns or things like that. I'm talking about we have a trauma situation with kids that we better do something about, or we're going to keep cleaning up the pieces. We're going to continue picking up the pieces for the explosions and the mess that our kids are making because they have no more room to deal with whatever the suffering that's happening in them. And violence is happening. So take a breath. I hope that this conversation is not only getting you ready to do something about it, but I hope this conversation is giving you ideas on where you can get involved. Here's what we're inviting you to do. We have created a community for people who are advocates for young men. If you care about young men in your community, in another community, anywhere in the world, we want you to join this community. I'm going to put the link in the show notes. There's a school community, SKOOL, and it's Advocates for Young Men. We invite you to join that community as we begin to have more of these conversations. I didn't plan to even mention that to you on this call, on this conversation, because that's not what I was about. But actually, I'm clearer than ever that if we don't begin getting the advocates for young men together, we are going to continue trying to hope that somebody else is going to fix the problem. So you have an opportunity to get involved with fixing the problem. You have an opportunity right now to say, I'm going to be a part of a community where people care about young men and about their healthy wellness and development, and you get to be a part of that with us. So get ready. Get ready. The Million Mask Movement is the movement that's going to help transform our schools, but we're going to need your help to do it. Like, I'm not going to be able to make it to every school. So if you're listening to this episode, if you're watching this video, I'm asking you that if you care about young men in your community, middle school, high school, even down to elementary school. Most of our work starts around 5th grade with the mask. But the first step is giving young people a space to be able to say, hey, here's what I'm talking about. Here's what I'm letting people see about me. Here's what's happening on the front of my mask. And here are the things that I'm not talking about anonymously first. And when we can recognize that anonymously, which is very representative of what happened with that visit to that young man's house, they didn't know who it was. They had an idea who it was. But anonymously, they recognized that something was going on. We can anonymously find that a lot of our kids are going through stuff. They're struggling, and they don't think they have anybody to talk about it with. I hope you have somebody to talk about it with when you're struggling. And if you don't, then please know that if you can understand how it is for an adult to carry loads and not have anybody to talk about it with, you can imagine what it's like for a kid to deal with the same. This conversation is not a political conversation, but if you believe that the right to bear arms is more important than the right to liberty, life, and the pursuit of happiness, then it may feel political to you. I just want you to know that this is about students and schools. And it's also to say that 56% of U.S. adults want our gun laws to be stricter. I'm not going to be in a political conversation with anybody about whether some amendment is important than another amendment. So everyone who wants to rail around a Second Amendment and be a right to bear arms, they somehow ignore the Constitution that bears these amendments that says I have the right to liberty and the pursuit of happiness. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I think it's pretty hard to pursue happiness when you're scared to get up every day and go to school. I think it's hard to pursue happiness when you're sending your kids off to school and you're wondering if they're going to make it home at night. So you go to work trying to focus on your job, and yet all you're wondering is every time your phone rings, you're checking your phone. Your addiction to the phone is just as bad as the teenager's addiction to the phone, because every time it rings, you got to wonder, is it my kid calling me that I need to pick up the phone? Don't get me started on that conversation, because that will be one of our topics around the addiction to these devices that not only our young people are having, but that adults are having as well. And I'm not talking about just you. I'm talking about us. I'm talking about me. I'm talking about the scroll rolls that happened, and an hour later, I'm like, what the heck has just happened? How did I just lose all that time? How did I just time warp into the future? So I'm not here to blame anybody about these things, but I am here to say that we're going to get down to the bottom of who is going to be a part of solving it. And guess what? I'm not waiting around for anybody else to solve these problems. We in the Million Mask movement are going to be a part of transforming education by first inviting young people to tell us how they're doing. And we invite you to do the same. If you have not yet made a mask, I invite you to do that right now. Like, don't do anything else. We're going to have the link to the school community. Join the community. It's free to join. It's a community of conversations happening around what's happening with our young men. And I am telling you that your first responsibility today is to get clear about what mask you're walking through the world in. Because if you care about young men, then when we ask them how they're doing and they say, I'm good and I'm fine, you know how hard it is for you to ask them, well, are you sure? Because if you're not clear about your own mask, you should be clear that they are very clear about theirs. That was a little If you don't know that young people know how to tell adults the right answer, then you have missed understanding how young people operate in the world. They're experts at the easy answers. And we are trying to find spaces for them to be able to navigate, first anonymously with 3 words. 3 words on the front and 3 words on the back. We are anonymously giving them room to talk about how they're feeling for real. And then the next step is to build the spaces around them in the communities so that they can have regular check-ins with friends and colleagues and teachers and counselors, or wherever the level of engagement they need to realize they're not alone. So that is part of the work. That is what this next season of Taking Off the Mask podcast is about. And as I showed up in this conversation and telling you that I'm carrying around a lot of sadness right now, luckily I've had a circle to talk about it with. I had my men's circle last night to talk about it with, and tonight I'll be with another group circle of men that I get to process some of these emotions with. But I've learned that to keep it to myself, to bottle it up, is only to create a dangerous situation for those around me. I hope that you begin to find the people around you that you can take off that emotional mask and realize that you're not alone. Folks, thank you for being a part of the Taking Off the Mask podcast. Today was a little bit different, just listening to me talk, but I'm hoping that as we begin to bring in educators, conversations with students, and if you know somebody that you think we should be talking to, please don't hesitate to reach out to us and let us know. We'll be talking to you again real soon. Thank you for being a part of the Taking Off the Mask podcast. You can make your mask anonymously at millionmask.org. millionmask.org, and the movement is ready for you to be a part of it. And so we hope to see you soon. We hope you will anonymously make your mask. You will join our school community, Advocates for Young Men. We'll see you very soon. Take care, everybody. Thank you. The Taking Off the Mask podcast is produced by Ryan Louie and graphics by Kelly Wong. Guests are managed by Dan Paloma, and the podcast is edited by Samuel Matingo. We'd like to thank everyone who's been a part of the creation of this podcast. And for every guest that has been a part of the show, you are now a part of the Taking Off the Mask family. The Taking Off the Mask podcast is brought to you by the Ever Forward Club. And if you like what you've heard today, please subscribe, write a 5-star review, and share this with someone. We look forward to having more conversations that matter. And please remember, there's more to you than anybody can see by just looking at you.